How to confront the CIA and the FBI. One of the biggest problems during the 60s was the CIA and the FBI. So this doesn't happen again, we must think of ways to counteract them. The first solution to this problem is simple. These are government agencies. Get enough of your people elected, and now these agencies have handlers. The more people like AOC and Jamal Bowman are elected, the easier it will be to control what these agencies do. We will finally have people to watch the watchmen. The other solution is investigative journalism and whistleblowers. That's how the FBI was brought to its knees for the first time. In 1971, some activists broke into an FBI office and stole documents which they released to the public. I needn't tell you what wonderful effects this had up until the NSA, and then thankfully, there was a person like Snowden who brought everything down again for us. But whistleblowers aren't something we can rely upon. Who knows when the next decent person will come along, considering the amount of consequences a person like that must face. Snowden is in exile. We needn't break the law and jeopardize ourselves. Investigative journalism can also uncover government corruption, such as the Watergate scandal. Investigative journalists are the perfect counterweight to organizations like the FBI and the CIA. Whereas the FBI and the CIA gather and hide information, investigative journalists gather and spread information. The problem is that the FBI and the CIA often work together in the interests of large corporations, and as Noam Chomsky pointed out, many news organizations today are themselves large corporations, with interests in maintaining the status quo and disrupting leftist organizations. They probably aren't going to be thrilled with any information that will make society more socialistic. Fox News and CNN are private businesses. When news was a burgeoning industry, they were more reliable. They needed to establish themselves. If I didn't mention it before, you can more readily rely on rising or dying industries to be on your side if you are a leftist, because they are more desperate to get viewers, and viewers who are constantly on the lookout for new sources of information are leftists who aren't satisfied with the status quo. Once news organizations like NBC, ABC, CBS became large, greed took over, and investigative integrity took over investigative integrity, and it became imperative not to make any news stories that contradicted the status quo. For decades, very little change has occurred, and in fact, under Reagan, society began to regress. But now we have the internet and social media. These, for a short while, will be powerful weapons. Social media companies have been rising, and now they are large, but they are still on our side. They benefit from net neutrality, just like activists. And so there is, for the time, a partnership. Of course, this will not last. As soon as social media giants begin to fear activists more than service providers, they will crack down, which is why you shouldn't give up on old techniques of creating change. Canvass, phone bank, and donate, and vote, obviously. Protesting I don't like. Don't do that. But the other stuff is good, and this brings me back to journalism. We have two types of journalists now. We still have the old kind that uses print, and we have the new kind online. Both have strengths and weaknesses, and if you're interested in becoming a journalist, I leave it up to you where you want to operate. How to avoid burnout. People have different strategies, but what works for me is watching or listening to something uplifting. One of the most inspiring books is the autobiography of Malcolm X. Every time I read that, I get energized to stand up and do something. Also listening to music from the 60s about protest or the song Fuck the Police. Some suggest taking breaks and taking it easy, and sure, do that if you feel you must. Also, keep in mind, you're fighting for change, and you do it and so you're in for the long haul. It takes most movements, to my knowledge, at least a decade to produce the change they want. The next 10 years are critical. After the beer hall putsch in Germany, the Nazis rebuilt themselves and in 1933 took control of the government. Something similar happened during the insurrection at the Capitol, and if we don't crack down and crack down hard, we will have our own Hitler controlling the government. America has the power of hindsight and a long tradition of activism. However, reactionaries are always well funded and less harshly penalized by the established powers, because their enemies are the same. But in America, at least, progressive movements are usually successful. We have, to some extent, freedom of speech, and we do have friends in high places. The arts, for example, tend to be more liberal because artists, for example, actors and writers, must put themselves in other people's shoes. This type of activity creates empathy, which is why I think writers and actors tend to be more liberal. It is true that movie making is a business, but high-profile actors cannot easily be fired because of their name recognition, which is a powerful tool in advertising to get people to watch the movie. Therefore, Kirk Douglas was able to break the blacklist in Hollywood with Spartacus with little pushback. The other friends of activists are the highly educated. Obviously, if you are highly educated, you are going to know more about the issues of the world. Teachers and professors have worked hard to make sure they aren't fired for what they think, and so they are thankfully able to influence students. Dying and conversely burgeoning industries always on the lookout for new viewers will be on our side, since the established press does not try to appeal to the left. Down on the ground methods, if for people down on the ground, we have our own methods. We can canvass, phone bank, register people to vote, and donate money to political campaigns. Also, of course, just talking to your friends and family members. An interesting phenomenon occurred early on in the current leftist movement. The left traded popular support for political power, which I don't think is a good thing or a bad thing. Just another way of doing things. Initially, I thought it was a good thing, but currently I'm ambivalent. If you compare it to the New Atheist movement that preceded our current movement, that was a very popular movement, and if I remember correctly, at least online where it predominated. There wasn't a single video on YouTube I can recall advocating religion that wasn't ratioed to hell and back. Even liberal Christians were ridiculed. If you go to a conservative video online, it might be strongly disliked, but it also might be well liked by its viewers. And there are a couple reasons for this. First off, social media was relatively new during the New Atheist movement, and as I've said before, new media is always taken advantage of early on by activists who are desperate for a way to spread their message. However, there is another reason. I remember Christopher Hitchens saying early on he didn't particularly care about voting. He said in his speech, just support voices you agree with. And this led to greater solidarity. Just compare it to the left today, which is divided between those who advocate for voting and getting political, and those who wish to abstain from politics. One reason things took a political turn is because Trump was in office versus Obama, and therefore the left was desperate to get him out. Either way, it doesn't matter. The New Atheists might have had popular support, but keep in mind there wasn't a single atheist politician, not to my knowledge. Now that we are on this train, I don't see any reason to get off. I will continue to push for more progressives in office. If we are successful, I predict we will have somebody in office like AOC or Bernie Sanders in the next 10 years. But to bring it back to my original point, we could also have somebody like Hitler. As an aside, I strongly oppose protests, though at least when they are unsafe. I don't like self-harm and I don't like martyrdom. You're of more use to the cause alive, and anyways life is precious and shouldn't be wasted. The documentation of wrongdoing is also good. Whistleblowers and exposés are a major godsend to the left when they emerge.